Hi, good afternoon. I am going to be demonstrating essentially a small lesson on how to play a 12-bar blues. I've been a musician for 30 years and have found the 12-bar blues and knowing how to negotiate them and how to use them to be invaluable. There's very simple ways to do it, and there are very complicated ways to do it. And I'm going to give you a little bit of both, just for illustration's sake. So definitely a history of the 12-bar blues is important. Kind of started off late 1800s in America. Essentially, African-American slaves were doing call and response sort of stuff in the fields, and that sort of filtered over into music, and became sort of a long-term genre. Like it has its own its own form and its own vocabulary and its own way of going about things. The 12-bar blues have found its way into basically every single genre of music. You can't listen to country music without hearing some 12-bar blues. Obviously rock music and Led Zeppelin, the stuff John Mayer does, what Stevie Ray Vaughan did, it all has its roots in 12-bar blues. And not every song, is a 12-bar blues, but many of them are, and you might recognize them, and some of you might be guitarists that play. So the first thing I'm going to demonstrate is essentially a pentatonic scale. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the pattern of chords that go on in the 12-bar blues. It's essentially a 12-bar structure, focusing on the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord in certain orders. All those chords tend to be dominant 7 chords in the blues, and there's a way to go about negotiating them that I'll talk about here a little bit later in this video. And I'm going to play one right now that I looped on my loop station so you can hear it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play against it with a pentatonic scale. Just improvise a little bit so you get an idea of what some of the simpler ideas of blues are, actually. So here we go in that whole idea. So you can definitely hear the structure, and that's an extremely familiar thing. What I'm playing essentially against that, and I'm just improvising, it's what's called a minor pentatonic blues scale. This can be both major and minor, depending on what position you start in. If you know anything about music, you know a little bit about relative minors and things, and hopefully you do before you start off on a journey like this. But I'm going to include charts for all this on my blog, so you'll be able to download these and see. But the pentatonic blues scale is essentially starting on G. That's the scale itself, and it continues across the fingerboard. Really simple. Common. People have used this for years to make great blues music. And I'm going to delve a little bit more into why it works and what it does later on, but right now, you're just going to have to practice it. I'm going to play again. I'm going to do the same thing we just did and use the 12-bar pentatonic, the pentatonic blues pattern to play a little bit of a solo here. Band-Aid's coming off. I'm just going to kill it. Once you've learned the pentatonic blues pattern, which is fairly simple to learn, the next step is to kind of delve into a little more complicated harmony that kind of centers around where the blues work. Everyone pretty much knows do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We learned that when we were kids. It's stuck in our heads, and it is basically the basis of all music, particularly in the blues. You hear that G7 chord that I was playing earlier. sits as the 5 chord, the dominant 7 chord, in a C major key. So 5 to 1 sounds really strong. Now what happens is the blues never actually play anything but 7 chords, so you end up hearing that tension that wants to be C, but it's constantly changing to another tension, another 7 chord, which is really the dominant 5 chord in another key, at the key of F. And back again, so it goes back and forth. So to really explore the blues and get a good handle on what a blues musician does, you kind of have to know how to switch in and out of the modes of the major scale, which I'm going to show you on my website. But there's a scale called the Mixolydian scale, and it's essentially a C major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but starting on the 5th tone, just like the chord. So it ends up being this. Kind of hear how that matches up with that chord. I'm taking that all the way across the fingerboard. You have. Now you can do that basically if I play against this loop that I made. I'm not switching from chords that are all within the same key. I'm essentially switching keys kind of in a sense. I'm going from the 5 chord in the key of C, which is the G7, to playing a C7, which isn't in the key of C, it's actually in the key of F. So what happens if I tried to play the G Mixolydian scale against the next chord in that, which I've looped here, you'll hear there's a little bit of a clash, and it doesn't really make any sense. I'm going to do that right now so you can kind of hear how it doesn't work. Not good. So I'm going to fix that note. And I'm going to play, instead of that note, I'm going to play the C Mixolydian scale, which is essentially the key of F. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but with C as our center. And you'll get this then. Makes a lot more sense. In the key of G7, I mean, in a G blues, is a D dominant 7 chord, which is essentially the same as the key of G. It's that chord, except that you start on this note. So you get a little different sound. And here's another loop with a D7 chord with those notes played against it. Sloppy, but I mean, I'm trying to make a point here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to piece it all together so you can kind of hear a Mixolydian scale as I switch, as the chord switches, I switch from Mixolydian mode to Mixolydian mode. And I'm going to talk over what I'm playing so you can kind of get a rough idea what I'm doing. Because this is supposed to be 10 minutes long, 10 to 15 minutes. I'm trying to give you as much information as possible in a short period of time. So I'm going to have the camera stop, piece this all together, and I'm not going to lie to you, it takes a little bit of practice to get to the point where you feel like you can effectively switch from Mixolydian mode to Mixolydian mode, from G to C to D as you're playing through a blues, but with practice, like anything, you're going to get better at it. Now, I might make some mistakes here, but this is for instructional purposes, so don't criticize me. G Mixolydian, C, G, as I can do. Hopefully you can do good too.